Imagine a tiny spark setting off a massive fire. That's how World War I began, a single event that exploded into a global conflict. It wasn't just two countries fighting, it was a world war, pulling in nations from every corner of the globe. The spark? A car ride in Sarajevo with Archduke Franz Ferdinand inside. He was assassinated, and that one act set off a chain reaction. Like dominoes falling, each country was pulled in by alliances and promises. This war lasted 4 years, changed borders, and changed how people thought about war forever. Real people, young soldiers, families lived through it, and their choices shaped our world. Understanding how it started helps us see how small actions can have huge consequences. It's a true story, not a fairy tale, and it's one we can learn from. Let's see how that tiny spark became a giant fire. The world split into two massive teams: the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria, and the Allied powers led by France, Britain, and Russia, with help from countries like Japan, Italy, and later the USA. Britain's empire brought in Australia, Canada, India, and more, making it a truly global conflict. The war began in the summer of 1914, more than a century ago, and lasted 4 long years. People thought it would be quick. Many young men signed up, expecting to be home by Christmas. Instead, it became a daily reality, changing lives everywhere. Radios and newspapers spread the news, and the world watched as the war dragged on. No one imagined how hard or long it would be, or how much the world would change. The teams were set, and the stage was ready for a conflict like no other. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was more than just a shocking act of violence. It was the spark that ignited a powder keg. Tensions had been simmering in Europe for years, and this single event set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. Thanks to a complex web of alliances, what could have remained a local crisis quickly escalated into something much bigger. Countries had made promises to defend each other, binding themselves together in a fragile network. Austria-Hungary, seeking to assert its power and punish Serbia, declared war, expecting a swift and decisive victory. But the situation was far from simple. Russia, determined to protect its Slavic ally Serbia and maintain its influence in the Balkans, began mobilizing its massive army, signaling that this conflict would not be contained. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary and eager to assert its own dominance, declared war on Russia. Within days, Germany also declared war on France, Russia's ally, setting the stage for a much larger confrontation. To outflank France, Germany invaded neutral Belgium, violating its neutrality. This act drew Britain into the conflict, honoring its promise to defend Belgium and maintain the balance of power in Europe. In just a matter of weeks, nearly all of Europe was swept up in the chaos, as nations honored their alliances and mobilized for war. Each country was pulled in by promises, alliances that were meant to keep the peace, but instead turned a local crisis into a global catastrophe. The dominoes fell with astonishing speed, and soon millions of people, soldiers and civilians alike, were swept up in a conflict that no one could control or stop. It's a powerful lesson. Alliances, while meant to provide security, can also pull you into battles and consequences you never imagined facing. What started as a small spark, a single gunshot, became a wildfire that raged across Europe, consuming everything in its path and changing the course of history. The devastation was immense. Cities were destroyed, millions of lives were lost, and the world would never be the same again. All because of a tangled web of promises, rivalries, and a single tragic event that set everything in motion. The dominoes had fallen, and the world was plunged into the First World War, a conflict that would shape the century to come. The war quickly turned into a stalemate, with both sides digging deep, elaborate trenches for protection. What began as a temporary measure soon became a defining feature of the conflict, shaping the daily lives of millions of soldiers. These muddy, crowded trenches stretched for hundreds of kilometers across the Western Front, snaking through fields and villages. For years, the front lines barely moved, trapping soldiers in a seemingly endless cycle of waiting and fighting. Life in the trenches was miserable, cold, wet, and filthy. Soldiers battled not just the enemy but also swarms of rats, lice, and the constant threat of disease. The mud was so deep it could swallow boots, and the stench was overwhelming. Soldiers faced endless boredom, interrupted by moments of sheer terror. Days were spent waiting, writing letters, or staring at the sky, while sudden attacks could force them to dash into deadly gunfire at a moment's notice. Food was basic and repetitive. Canned beef, hard biscuits, and whatever treats arrived from home. Hot meals were rare, and clean water was even rarer, making every bite and sip precious. Despite the hardship, soldiers formed strong friendships, sharing jokes, stories, and songs to keep their spirits up. These bonds were a lifeline, helping them cope with fear and loss. The trenches became a world of their own, full of courage, suffering, and resilience. Every face told a story of endurance, and every day brought new challenges. Every day was a struggle to survive, and every soldier relied on the person next to them. Acts of kindness and bravery were common, as men looked out for each other in the harshest conditions. It wasn't the adventure many expected. It was a test of endurance, hope, and the human spirit. Letters home often hid the true horrors, as soldiers tried to protect their loved ones from worry. The Western Front became a symbol of the war's brutality. With no man's land between the trenches, a deadly, desolate wasteland marked by barbed wire and shell craters. Life in the trenches changed everyone who lived through it, leaving deep scars but also unforgettable bonds of brotherhood and survival. World War I saw massive, deadly battles that lasted for months and cost millions of lives. The Battle of the Somme was one of the bloodiest, with tens of thousands killed or wounded on the first day alone. At Gallipoli, ANZAC soldiers from Australia and New Zealand fought bravely in a failed campaign, becoming legends back home. Verdun was another brutal battle, lasting 10 months and symbolizing the endless grind of the war. Soldiers faced artillery, machine guns, and poison gas. New horrors for a new kind of war. These battles showed incredible bravery from ordinary people asked to do extraordinary things. Their courage and sacrifice are why we remember them today. The war was fought by farmers, workers, and clerks, people who became heroes. Their stories remind us of the true cost of war. The legacy of their bravery lives on. The war changed life for everyone, not just the soldiers. With so many men away, women stepped into new roles, working in factories, driving buses, and even serving as police officers. They became vital to the war effort, proving they could do any job. Food was scarce, so families rationed and grew their own vegetables. Children helped by knitting socks, collecting scrap, and following the war's progress. Every family felt the war's impact, waiting anxiously for news from the front. Women's contributions led to big changes, including the right to vote. The home front was a place of sacrifice, teamwork, and resilience. Everyone played a part, from the youngest to the oldest. The war effort united entire nations in ways never seen before. For years, the United States watched the war from across the Atlantic, determined to stay out of the conflict raging in Europe. Many Americans believed the fighting was far away and not their concern, hoping to avoid the devastation that had already swept across the continent. But German attacks on passenger and merchant ships, including the infamous sinking of the Lusitania, and secret plots like the Zimmermann telegram, changed their minds and stirred public outrage. In 1917, America made a momentous decision and joined the Allies, sending a wave of new hope across the war-torn nations. The United States sent not only fresh troops, but also vital supplies, weapons, and resources that the exhausted Allies desperately needed. The arrival of the Americans brought renewed energy and determination, giving the weary Allied forces new hope and strength to continue fighting. By late 1918, the Central Powers were collapsing, defeated on the battlefield, starving at home, and facing revolutions. Their armies were retreating, and their people demanded peace. An armistice was signed, and the fighting finally stopped on November 11, 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Relief and celebration swept through the Allied countries. People poured into the streets, waving flags, singing, and embracing one another, overwhelmed with joy that the long nightmare was over. But the cost was enormous. Millions of lives had been lost, families were shattered, and entire cities lay in ruins. The scars of war would not heal quickly. In 1919, leaders from around the world gathered in France to create the Treaty of Versailles, hoping to build a lasting peace and officially end the war. The treaty blamed Germany for the conflict and imposed harsh penalties, including heavy reparations and territorial losses. Leaders hoped these measures would prevent future wars and create a safer world for the next generation. But the end of the war was complicated, with many people feeling both hope for peace and uncertainty about the future. Some celebrated, while others worried about what was to come. The world looked forward with hope, but also with anxiety, as new challenges and the seeds of future problems began to grow from the ruins. The world had changed forever. The war was over, but its effects would ripple through history, shaping nations and lives for decades to come. Its impact would last for generations as people remembered the sacrifices and lessons of the Great War. The story of World War I was far from finished. Its legacy would echo through the years, reminding us of the cost of war and the hope for peace. World War I ended over a century ago, but its effects are still with us. We remember to honor the millions who died and to learn from the past. The war changed borders, created new countries, and pushed technology forward, planes, tanks, and more. It also changed society, especially for women who gained new rights and respect. Remembrance Day, with its red poppies, is our way of saying thank you and promising not to forget. The war taught us about the cost of conflict and the value of peace. Memorials around the world remind us of the sacrifices made. By remembering, we connect with history and commit to building a better future. The lessons of World War I are as important now as ever. The story of World War I is about more than battles. It's about choices, consequences, and change. We learn history not just to remember dates, but to understand people and the world we live in. By studying the past, we see how small actions can shape the future. The war reminds us to value peace, talk through problems, and work together. Every generation has the chance to choose friendship over fighting. Our job is to build a world where another great war never happens. The lessons of World War I are a guide for us all. If you liked this video, check out my World War II video also on the Mr. P Education Academy link in the description below.